run a company that wants to connect your web service to GitHub. So you've written an OAuth application. Your app lists who's opened PRs. Sounds simple, right? To access the endpoint to read the PR data, your OAuth app needs repo scope. And repo scope gives both read and write permissions to everything within a repo, on all your repositories, in your personal account and any organizations that you have access to. Kind of scary, right? Imagine you're an engineer, like Rachel. Rachel wants to install a CI service on a repo for a company she's contracting with. The company has hundreds of repositories, but they just want to try out this new service on this one. To do that, she visits the CI integrator site and authorizes with OAuth. The integrator stores her credentials. The integrator has to fetch all the organizations that she has access to. And then they have to fetch all the repositories that she has access to across all those orgs. Then the integrator has to display a list of those repositories to Rachel. She picks the one that she wanted in the first place. The integrator has to go set up hooks and keys for that selected repo. And then Rachel can use the CI service on that one repo. And although she just wanted to install that service on this one repo, the service would have access to every single repo that she has access to. Imagine you work in a company that uses a CI service. All your PRs automatically have these checks run. Everyone in the company happily uses this. Everyone knows when it's safe to merge PRs. And then one day that CI service suddenly stops working. The company and the CI integrator have to communicate to figure out what just happened, what went wrong. And it turns out that the guy who installed the service just left the company. So when his credentials are expunged, the CI service stops working as well. So now the company has to scramble and figure out who else can reinstall this service with active OAuth credentials and get things back up and running. These problems were often painful, awkward, and embarrassing for everyone. We've had many, many support requests for more OAuth scopes. The OAuth system wasn't really designed with many of our current use cases in mind, so there ended up being a lot of problems trying to make this work. And if our only hammer was OAuth scopes, we could have hit a lot of those nails, but the result probably wouldn't have solved our problems. Scopes were too broad in many cases, but we knew the issue was larger than that. There were a bunch of other problems too. The flow for a user to set up a new service meant they had to initiate that process on the integrator's site. The install flow, as you just saw, was really inefficient. The API flows for figuring out what a user had access to could get very chatty. And because an OAuth app is authorized by and uses a specific user's credentials, there's no direct connection between an organization and a service. There's other problems as well, like permissions around multiple accounts is a hard problem to solve. Most SaaS providers use multiple accounts. For example, in Google, I have my personal account and my work account, and the two are separate. On GitHub, I have one account, and that's a hard problem to deal with, fairly uniquely for us. This makes for a nice and simple experience for individual users, but for permissions checks, it makes things very complicated. And as we just saw with Rachel trying to install, in the OAuth model, if I authorize a CI app as Keavy, I'm authorizing it to access all of my personal repos and those within the organizations that I have access to. In an ideal world, we want to have a way for a user to install an integration in whatever repositories they want, whether that's on a personal or an organization account. So that single account, the whole flow of installing a service, the lack of a connection between an organization and a service, we maybe could have fixed some of these as isolated problems, but we knew they were related. So we took a step back and asked ourselves, if we were building this thing from scratch, knowing what we know now, what would we do differently? And we think we've got that now with integrations that we're launching as an early access ship today. So we really overhauled this whole area and came up with something new. This is a new and additional way to build on top of GitHub. So let me show you a bit about what that looks like. Users and organization admins can install these new integrations from within GitHub, from a public page for that specific integration. If the integration is publicly available, there'll be a green install button for anyone to install. I can choose whether to install that on my personal account or any of the organizations that I have admin access to. I can see which permissions this integration needs and what events it will subscribe to really clearly before I hit install. And importantly, I can choose individual repos to install this on, or I can select to have it installed on all my repos on my account. After I've installed, I can get at these again anytime in my settings and see exactly which repositories the integration has access to and change those settings at any time. As an integrator, I can go into my settings and register my integration on GitHub. I can configure it for just enough granular permission that it actually needs. For example, this integration needs to write commit statuses, write issues, read pull requests, and read what teams and members are in the organization. You'll notice that access to the contents of a repo, the code itself, is a separate permission. And this example integration just does not need access to the code, so it doesn't need that permission. The integration automatically gets one webhook that notifies it of any events in all the accounts that it's installed on. This integration only wants to subscribe to events about new team memberships and pull requests. As an integrator, I can choose whether my integration is available publicly for everyone to install or limited to be only installed within repositories in my organization. And you can start with that being only repositories in my organization, obviously, as you develop an integration and later release it publicly. So for the first time, the integration is a first-class actor within GitHub and can perform actions by itself. For example, writing commit statuses, opening issues, creating deployments. It can also perform certain actions on behalf of an authorized user. For example, creating a deployment. You can see in the UI here that the UI reflects that the deployment was carried out by an integration, but at the request of a human. A human hit the button to trigger the deploy. I'd like to share with you a couple of the particularly thorny areas we dealt with in designing and making this new model. A huge area was just around checking permissions. For users, it's a really straightforward check. Users can either read or write to your repository and everything within it. But then we made these granular permissions for integrations, which introduced a whole new permission system. An integration needs explicit permission on each resource that they interact with. So they can have permission to read code in a repository or just to write issues within a repository, and they don't get access to anything that they don't explicitly have that permission on. And these separate ways of granting permission need to live side by side. So a big challenge we faced was how to even check those permissions for the granular permissions that we've introduced for integrations without disturbing the regular permission system for the millions of traditional users that rely on them. So the old way of checking permissions for an API endpoint that, say, writes a commit status looks something like this. We simply need to check if the user can write to the repository and implicitly everything within that. In early spikes, we did multiple checks for these two permission systems, which worked for a while, but you can imagine would get very messy if we had to do that in every spot within the API where permissions are checked. So we refined that to a cleaner interface. And this basically involved adding an adapter layer in the middle so that we could have a consistent interface to check access, whether that was for a traditional user or a new integration. And this let us reduce the number of places we check the various possible permissions to one lower level location, which makes maintenance and security a whole lot easier. The second big thorny area was a flow for identity checks. For the end user, when a user clicks a link on GitHub, like a status field, we want them to see the build details on the integrator site, and we want that to just work, that the user can click on a link and be in the right place being shown the right information. We don't want an interstitial page about accepting more OAuth scopes if you've already installed this integration. For the integrator, we needed to be able to enable them to know who is this person that just landed on my site, and are they even allowed to see this information? We were driven by wanting a smooth user experience. We wanted users to be able to safely install and use the best development tools within GitHub. And for both the end user and the integrator, we wanted a smooth authorization flow that makes using these third-party services within GitHub as smooth an experience as is securely possible. So we looked at a few possible solutions for this identity flow, and we did look at OAuth, and confession, this is what we did in the early development cycles when we were trying to convert internal OAuth applications to integrations, and these apps already had an OAuth flow in place. So we just use that. And while this might seem like a perfectly reasonable solution in the short term, in the longer term, it would be terrible for several reasons. For starters, the maintenance headaches of managing a separate OAuth app for identity alongside an integration for doing the work would be huge. The additional authorization flows for the OAuth app could be really scary. If an org admin has already installed this integration that I interact with, and I just click a link to find out about a build failure, what am I even authorizing? Also, then we're back to dealing with OAuth scopes, which just don't map to the new granular permissions or a per repo level access. We looked at single sign-on, but the security concerns around who does the verification, having a shared secret, and mostly our complex permission system just didn't lend itself to this as a solution. After several spikes, we engineered an OAuth-like solution where the integrator can exchange a single-use nonce for the identity of the current GitHub user. And they can verify that that user is allowed to view the information on the requested installation. details about this flow are available in the developer docs that we just launched today. There were some tricky trade-offs with all these options, but we found a balance that we're comfortable with. Knowing what our desirable characteristics were from the outset helped with those decisions. It's very easy to go down rabbit holes with these hard engineering problems. Being led by the user experience we wanted to achieve for the end user and the integrator in terms of ease of use, security, and privacy kept us on track for maybe not the easiest solution ever, but the best one for us. I looked back recently for the history of this. This was the first commit into the written proposal for this project, and I love that the first commit is about the objective of making things easy. Remember I said we wanted to figure out, early on, we knew we wanted to figure out a holistic, solid solution for these big engineering problems that have plagued us for years. I'd like to share with you a few things that I think helped us achieve that. My team has enjoyed good collaborative relationships, early feedback, and ongoing support from people in and outside of engineering, from product, design, security, business development, and support. We've really valued that, and the depth and quality of the solutions of our whole work has been really enriched from having that wide and diverse support network. As engineers, we were trusted to explore this problem space. We were given space to research, to try things out, to throw them away, to reflect, to start again, armed with more knowledge. You can see many of these spikes were from last summer. We've been at this a little while. So looking back to those original problems that many companies and developers faced, I'd like to show you how they could look now. The company that wants to integrate their service with GitHub but had to request more permissions than they actually needed. Now, they can register their integration on GitHub and choose the smallest amount of permissions they need to still do their job. The developer who wants to install an integration within GitHub on a specific repo, and the integrator had to do this complicated back and forth and end up with access to every repo that she has access to. Now the flow is a lot more efficient. The user starts the flow on github.com and just clicks install, done. She installs the integration on the repo she wants, and that's it. It doesn't give the integration access to any of her other repos or her organization's repos. That's it. The CI integration that someone installs for the whole company to use now uses its own credentials, not the individual's. So if whoever did the original install leaves the company, it still works just fine. So you might be wondering, when would I use an integration? A big thing to keep in mind that integrations are a completely changed focus. You're not accessing GitHub on behalf of a user. You're accessing GitHub as the integration itself. So something you might want that for is when you want to take action independently of a specific user, when you want to install on an organization or on a per repository basis, and when you want granular permissions. Things you might use an integration for. The big use cases will probably be code scanners, continuous integration, continuous deployment, issue management, integrations that mostly carry out actions as themselves, or anything else that you can dream up. OAuth applications are not going anywhere. You can continue to use those, and they will be the right solution for many use cases. Those use cases are probably when you want to take action only as a specific user, when perhaps that full access is desired for your use case, or when you just want to use GitHub as an identity provider. We should remind you this is an early access release, so the details aren't final or complete, and probably shouldn't be relied on for production use with your entire user base. We're really excited to share this feature with you in this early access stage. We'd love you to all start playing with this. You can find the docs at developer.github.com. Have a look around that, explore, see what would work, what wouldn't work for your use case. We'd love your feedback, and you can come talk to us now at this new forum at platform.github.community. We'd love to hear what you try and build and what problems you come across. I've been the engineering lead on this project, but we've had a wide squad contribute to this over the past 2 years. Many of us are here at Universe today, and we have a speaker office hours later this afternoon. So feel free to come chat with us. We'd love to hear your feedback. That's it. Thank you.